Oklahoman newsroom. It is time for Orange Alert, our extended look at Oklahoma State football. I'm Jenny Carlson here in studio with fellow columnist Barry Trammell, OSU beat writer Scott Wright. Guys, it's a heck of a ball game sizing up for us on Saturday up in Stillwater. Boise State, Oklahoma State. After a couple so-so non-conference games, this looks like anything but so-so. Scott, let's start with the offense because obviously Taylor Cornelius taking over in that starting quarterback spot. This is going to be unlike anything he's seen to this point. We saw an okay performance in the opener, a better performance in the second game, but what's the expectation? What's the talk right now as it relates to Taylor Cornelius?
You know, the thing is, you've got to see him continue to make steps, progressing in the right direction. You got to see him cutting out the mistakes that he made a week ago. You know, especially pointing to that big interception that he threw in the end zone. That was what Mike Yurcich described as unforgivable. Rolling out, you know, throwing into double coverage in the end zone on a 1st and goal situation. You throw that ball away, you scramble, whatever. Anything but throwing it to the other team is perfectly fine in that situation. So, you know, take your chance on 2nd and 3rd down. But you've got to see him erase those mistakes. You know, you saw him cut down on the throws that we thought were maybe some first game jitters against Missouri State. The wide open passes that he missed. You know, he was a lot more accurate in the second game. So you want to see that continue to progress, his comfort level to continue to progress. Obviously, it's going to be a tougher opponent, a more physical defense, some tests for his offensive line. You've got to see him stand in the pocket or get out and throw on the move, which he has been really adept at doing so far this season. Whatever he needs to do to get the ball in the hands of his playmakers.
Scott, let me ask you, this critiquing of Corn Dog that we're all doing. Mm-hmm. If you look at his numbers, they're really good. Yeah. He's made some throws that nobody's crazy about, but the truth is, Mason Rudolph made some throws How much are we just putting him on the scale of comparing him to Mason Rudolph? And if he was just replacing, you know, Wes Lunt or J.W. Walsh or somebody, there wouldn't be near this consternation.
I totally agree. I think that the bar was set so high by the last 3 years of Mason Rudolph that Taylor Cornelius really had no shot at meeting those type of expectations. You know, some of the errors that he made really stuck out because they were wide open guys that he underthrew or threw behind, and you know, a really bad interception, a really poor decision to throw that ball against South Alabama. So those things stick with fans a little bit more than other things. But in general, to put up the numbers that he has, to do what Mike Gundy says and take what the defense is giving, we saw him do that last week with throwing to the outside guys, Tyron Johnson, Tylan Wallace. The running backs were jammed up with South Alabama crowding the box. And those were the guys who were in one-on-one situations, and he knew they could go make a play, and so he got them the ball 15 times. So he's really making good decisions in general and doing what he needs to do to make this offense work.
You know, it's going to take 11 guys on offense to beat Boise State because they're that good. So I don't want to ask this question to you, Barry, without acknowledging that. We'll talk about the other 10 and what they need to do. But what, in your estimation, does Taylor Cornelius need to do in specific against Boise State? I mean, what are the important things that, you know, if he does A, B, and C, Oklahoma State has a good chance of winning this game on Saturday?
I'd say, number one, get the Cowboys in the right play. You know, have everybody on the same page when the ball is snapped. Number two, what Scotty was talking about, make the right decisions. Put the ball where it needs to go. And number three, deliver it on target. And really, that's what we're talking about. An occasional deep ball is going to help a bunch. You know, if you can complete 1 or 2 deep balls, you know, fairly early in the game, Boise State's going to have to relax a little bit about stuffing the run. That's huge. But also the intermediate throws, you know, the slants and the deep outs, those kinds of things. If he can make the passes, make the decisions that I think we all believe he can make, but then make the throws that Mike Gundy keeps telling us he can make, then I think this offense can move.
Okay, so if that's important for Taylor Cornelius, Scott, let's talk about the other 10 guys because they've got running backs that are outstanding, an offensive line that's been shaky, and surprisingly shaky really to this point, receivers that they weren't really all that effective in game 1, but then defensive strategy changes and they're much more effective game 2. What do the Cowboys need out of the other 10 guys on offense?
Well, it starts with run blocking. They've got to win at the point of attack. Mike Gundy said you want your running back making his first cut past the line of scrimmage, not in the backfield. That was a huge problem against South Alabama. That was the thing that really got under Gundy's skin in that ball game. It changes the way that this offense can function because when guys are crowding the box, it not only takes away the run, it takes away their inside receivers and the things that they're able to do underneath. That's why you saw Tyron Johnson and Tylan Wallace getting the ball so much. Now, Boise State is a little bit more athletic on the outside. They're going to make things tougher to even in one-on-one situations with those two guys. So each level, each game is another level of difficulty. So we've got to see the offensive line start to run block well. Hope to open things up for Justice Hill. He's a guy that you're going to want to see touching the ball if you're an Oklahoma State fan a lot of times this week. So they've got to open things up for him or find ways to get him involved to spread the defense out a little bit and give them different options to do things to get their inside receivers, their outside receivers, and their running backs involved.
Yeah, and by the way, Justice Hill not overtaxed in the first couple of games. Really took care to make sure to limit his touches. But Barry, as it relates to run blocking and getting the run game going, if you look at Boise State, if you look historically, if you look around the NFL, you're going to see some Boise State defensive linemen in the NFL. I have no idea how their current offensive line might fare in the future, but you got to think that's a point of strength. How concerning is that for Oklahoma State?
Well, I mean, it's probably Exhibit A of Mike Gundy's biggest worries. Boise State is a tough team. They're a physical team. We wrote about this. Scotty wrote about it in today's Oklahoman. We think of the crazy plays and the trick plays to win the Fiesta Bowl, but that was sort of an aberration. Boise State is a hit-you-in-the-mouth football program, and that's what they're going to do Saturday in Stillwater, and the Cowboys have to hit them back. What's gone on in these first two games with South Alabama and Missouri State, OSU has tried to force the run, and you can't blame them. You ought to be able to push around Missouri State and South Alabama. But I think it's going to change on Saturday. I think you're going to see, instead of running the ball to set up the pass, I think you're going to see the Cowboys have to pass to set up the run. You just can't line up and just, bop Boise. They're not going to allow it. You're going to have Cornelius throw the ball around the field, all kinds of different levels of passing. Relax, get a safety stepping back, get the linebackers back on their heels a little bit, and then that opens up the run. I think that's the way the Cowboys are going to have to move against Boise State.
And it's interesting to think about that pass game against Boise State. Obviously, Cornelius is going to have time. They're going to have to give him some time, even if they're not in a run block situation. But Scott, as you look at Boise State as a team defending the pass, they obviously pass it themselves a lot, so I have a feeling their defense is at least getting the practice, on the field during the week. But, you think about their competition, they've maybe faced some passing teams over the years. A team like Wyoming is on their schedule. Josh Allen was obviously there a year ago. You look at some of the other teams that they would play in conference, but I'm not sure anybody has the passing attack over the last, say, decade that Oklahoma State has. Is that where they really need to make hay, is really kind of test that Boise State secondary?
Yeah, it absolutely is. You talk about the teams they faced. Drew Brown's on that list too, out of Hawaii a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
But now, if he's in the game on Saturday, things have really gone crazy, if you ask me. But yes, Taylor Cornelius has got to be able to attack and find the holes in this secondary. Boise State doesn't face a passing attack like this on a very regular basis, so it's somewhat of an anomaly compared to the rest of their schedule. They do see some teams like this that like to throw it around, but not necessarily with this many weapons. So that's where Taylor Cornelius and those receivers have got to get involved. You've got to see things that can spread the field. Make sure that Boise State can't put 8 guys in the box and cover and do the things that they want to do in the rest of the field and make things difficult. So that's where I think this game is going to turn. Like Barry said, especially early, if Oklahoma State can complete some passes to spread the field a little bit in the Boise State defense, I think it's a good sign for Oklahoma State.
Well, as we talk about passing attack, we got to talk about Boise State and what Oklahoma State's defense is going to face. Barry, as you think about this Boise State team, they've got a familiar name throwing the ball around and ripping. People that have watched NFL games over the years will remember Mark, that's Brett's uncle, so he comes from a lineage of quarterbacks. They have thrown it around, got some good numbers in their first 2 games. What's going to be important for Oklahoma State? I mean, again, we talked about a step up in competition. This is another step up for this Oklahoma State defense that really hasn't seen anything to the level of Boise State yet.
No, it's a test. Brett Rippon is the leading career passer active in major college football. Been the Boise State, is it 38 straight starts, 38 or 39 for Boise State. Started 9 or 10 games as a freshman in 2015, been the quarterback ever since. So this guy he's sort of their Mason Rudolph. Now, he's not, let's not pretend that he's some unbelievable talent. He's not going to go in the first round of the NFL draft, but he's a big-time college quarterback. He's a guy, not just Big 12 caliber, and this year he'd be, one of the 2 or 3 best quarterbacks in the Big 12. So this guy can deliver the ball, and Boise State's got a great offensive identity. They run the ball, but they can also go to the modern game as well and do it often. So it's going to be a test for this new Jim Knowles defense. They really haven't been tested by South Alabama or Missouri State. They've looked good, but they should look good against the Jaguars and the Bears. Missouri State, the Bears. I started talking without even thinking. I think they're the Bears. Anyway.
That you knew South Alabama was more impressive to me. Way to go.
So anyway, but it's going to be a test for this Cowboy defense, but there's reason to think they're better. They seem to be running the ball pretty good. The line seems to be deep and getting after it with Brelford and Owens and Brundage. Bundage, I always call him Brundage. Why do I do that? With Calvin, Bundage, always, those 3 guys really rushing the passer. So they're doing, the signs are good. The signs are solid, but this is definitely a step up.
Okay, Scott, as we talk about defending Boise State, I think a lot of people are going to be focusing on the secondary, the 5 of the 4-2-5 in Jim Knowles' defense. Is that where we're going to know if Oklahoma State's had success defensively, or does it fall somewhere else within this defense to be successful against Boise?
It's going to be both. They've got to show that they can handle the physical challenge up front, which Jim Knowles seems to feel pretty confident in what his front 4 can do against a physical offensive line. They've got a lot of experience at the main 3 guys at defensive tackle, the main 3 guys at defensive end. He really likes that group of 6, and as he rotates them in to handle the physicality of a team like Boise up front. But the inexperience on the back end is really going to be a curious point, because you do have such a veteran quarterback who understands how to how to read coverages, how to understand what's going on back there, and sort of pick a defense apart. He's got a lot of talent at receiver. They've got a really physical running back that they can use as well. So they've got a lot of things they can do. So when you're a guy like Malcolm Rodriguez, who's only really played in the secondary for 2 games in his entire career at this point as a true sophomore, you've got to be mentally prepared to handle what a veteran quarterback is going to bring. Tabo Municki in the same situation. Kenneth Edison-Magruder and the cornerbacks have seen a lot more football, seen a lot of good quarterbacks over their careers, but this is still their 3rd game now in this defense and understanding how all the pieces fit together. So, there's going to be some pressure on those guys in the secondary, especially those young guys, I think.
Barry, on the defensive side for Oklahoma State, who's the guy you think is the key to a good day against Boise State?
I want to say Brelford. He's really shown that he's can be an elite pass rusher. They need him to be on Saturday. He's been pretty solid throughout his career. This year he's showing signs of stardom. If he can keep that up, if he can put pressure, I'm not talking about getting 2 or 3 sacks. You don't have to sack the quarterback to affect the game. If he can just make Brett Rippon uncomfortable, then that goes a long way towards Oklahoma State winning this game.
Who you putting as the key to defensive success, Scotty?
The guy I just mentioned, Malcolm Rodriguez. I think that he's a guy, as a young guy, he's in sort of a strong safety type of role in that 3 safety system that Jim Knowles runs. So he's going to be up in the box some. He's going to have to come up there and be physical, which it hasn't been a problem for him so far, but we'll see at a different level. He's going to be in coverage sometimes. Maybe it's a slot receiver, maybe it's a tight end. So there's a lot that's going to be asked of him in this situation, and I think that if he has a good game, I think it really shows good for Oklahoma State.
Before we get to picks here on Orange Alert, let's flip it to say offense. Who's going to be key? Scott, we'll start with you. Who's the key offensively to a good day against Boise State?
I'm going to go with Larry Williams. Okay. A little bit of an odd pick, but he's going to be on the field whether he's at left guard or right guard, and he is I think a big key in their run blocking schemes, making things happen up front. and he's a veteran guy who necessarily hasn't played a ton of games at Oklahoma State because of injuries, but I think that he can really impact the way that the run game goes and make a difference to help open things up. I think that he's a guy that this entire group looks to as a leader, and I think that a good week of practice leading into this ball game is really key for those guys up front, and I think that he's a guy that can really help them do that.
Who's that key for you, Barry?
Well, I mean, Corn Dog clearly is number one on anybody's list, but apart from him, how about Tyron Johnson? This is a guy who has shown flashes of brilliance, has shown flashes of being a star. We saw it against Tulsa a year ago. We saw it against South Alabama the other night. If Tyron Johnson can hit a couple of big plays, maybe one home run, if he can sort of scare the daylights out of Boise State, that's a big advantage for the Cowboys. So, OSU, to Mike Yurcich's credit, really did a good job of getting the ball to Tyron Johnson in a lot of different ways the other night. If he can do that again and can impact Boise State's secondary, then the Cowboys are going to be in pretty good shape.
Sort of in the same way you talked about, Brailford doesn't need to get sacks. He just needs to make some uncomfortable times. I think Tyron Johnson and probably Tylan Wallace can both make that Boise State secondary a little bit skittish if they can hit some big plays. All right, guys, let's get to picks. Our staff was split on who wins this game. OSU, Boise State, 3-3. But all three of us here picked OSU, so I don't know what that means. But Bear, we've all got close game. I mean, nobody's got a blowout in this thing. Bear, you've got Oklahoma State 31-29. What do you see shaking out here?
I just looked at it this way. They're in Stillwater, advantage OSU. I love Boise State. I've been flying the Boise State flag since before the OU Fiesta Bowl 12 years ago. But if you look back in the last 7 years, Boise State is 1-5 on the road against the Power 5 conferences. They haven't been great on the road. They won at Virginia in 2016, I think it was. They've lost at Washington State. They've lost at a variety of Power 5 teams. They've not played well on the road. Until they do, I'll probably go with the Cowboys in this one.
All right, Scott, you've got a slim margin for the Cowboys as well, 41-38, a little higher scoring. Sounds like you think that some points are going to be scored by both these teams.
Yeah, I do. I think that this comes down to a close play here or there. A really crucial play late in the game that swings this one. It could be a 3 to 7 point game either way. I don't see this being a blowout on either side. If Oklahoma State can take advantage of the home field advantage, like Barry was talking about, Mike Gundy wants to stripe the stadium because he wants a lot of people there. He wasn't just fired up about what colors everybody's going to be wearing. He wants the place packed and loud. So that's going to be a really important factor, I think, that's going to help out this game. Checking out Mike Gundy there. Oh, what a guy. So that's going to be a really big deal this week, and I think that we're going to see another level of comfort from Taylor Cornelius in this game. I think we're going to see some things from Jim Knowles and his defense that we haven't seen yet, and I think that's going to allow them to make things difficult on Brett Rippon and give them the edge ultimately.
Mike Gundy was a little bit goofy on Monday with his apparel, but this is the least bit goofy matchup that we've seen in a long time. This is going to be a fun game. It's a 2:30 start up in Stillwater. If you're not headed up there and want to watch it, ESPN is where you can check out OSU Boise State. Be sure to stay with the best coverage team anywhere at newsok.com and every day in the Oklahoman.